26th pick in the 2023 NFL Draft, the Dallas Cowboys select Mazi Smith, defensive tackle, Michigan.
They took a Michigan man off the board. Mazi Smith. Wow.
That's Rich Eisen during the NFL Draft last night in Kansas City. The first round going off. Thanks to the NFL Network for the sound. And congratulations to Mazi Smith, or as they were calling him last night, Mazi Smith, maybe like with a little English accent, but congratulations to Mazi. I have seen some videos already of Mazi down in the Big D, saying he's ready to go. And good luck to him. Welcome in on this Friday on Good Afternoon Michigan Football, where we're talking about the latest in Michigan sports. And today we have a Jaelin Llewellyn update from the basketball team. We'll talk about Mazi going to the Cowboys. I thought there was a couple interesting things draft-wise about Mazi and what they had to say about him, Michigan-related. I'll give you my overall NFL draft thoughts. But Michigan, the football squad, they are awaiting potentially another commitment this afternoon at 5:00, and that is Jake Guarnera. Jake Guarnera out of Ponte Verde, Florida. Florida is an interior offensive lineman, maybe a center, guard, but he is making the call this afternoon, this evening at his high school at 5:00 in Michigan. It's looking pretty good. Now, if you've been following along with this recruitment, things were looking really good. And then it kind of took a big left turn with Penn State, and it wasn't looking all that good. But now it looks like it's back on the track. So I don't know. Michigan, Penn State, things are looking good for Michigan. And I have to wait and see what's happening at 5:00. As you hear very often when it comes down to recruiting, you never know what's going to happen in recruiting. We're going to find out coming up. Sometimes everybody's saying, oh, yeah, this guy's in. And then, you just have to wait and see. We can say whatever we want, but then, then we got to wait and see the actual commitment. So we'll see what happens coming up at 5:00. Now, if Michigan does land Guarnera, this will continue their run of outstanding offensive linemen. As you've got previous to Guarnera, you had Blake Frazier out of Austin, Texas, committing. Before that, it was Sprague out of KC, Kansas City, Missouri. And then you had the two Ohio offensive linemen in Roebuck and Hamilton, Ben Roebuck, Luke Hamilton. And that gives you a starting offensive line, and with still possibilities if the staff really likes one of the remaining guys in like a Max Anderson out of Texas, out of Texas, or Bennett Warren. They could go a little bit deeper there. Never have enough good offensive linemen, or however you want to look at it. I think that is the way to look at it. You can never have enough talent there. You're already stacking it up, and that would be some good news. So something to keep an eye on later on this afternoon. It's all good when I take a look at it with Michigan and how they're going with recruiting. I mean, how could you say anything else? They're number one right now. And yeah, they've got a long ways to go until February, but things looking up on the field, things looking up in recruiting, things are just looking up. Things look good for the Michigan football program. This is good. I know for some people it's unusual, because most years of your life, the off season is like, I'm upset about this, or they really need to do that. And this is something they have to do. And look, we've nitpicked it, even when you're nitpicking it, saying they need a little bit better wide receiver. They really need some defensive tackles. Sure. It feels a little bit. Now they're not just cashing in 5-star after 5-star, but it feels a little bit like being maybe a Georgia or Alabama fan. And these guys are winning championships, and just hauling in 5-stars after the other, and still their fans are like, yeah, we'd like a couple more D linemen. And so it never stops, even if things are going really well. But it is going really well, and there's nothing wrong with always wanting a little bit more. So we take your feedback and see where the people are at on this Friday, and let's see where the people are at. And OT brings up something that I was going to mention, and let's go to it right now. Bryce Underwood, who is a quarterback from Belleville, Michigan. He was in Ann Arbor yesterday, OT says, and that is true. I can confirm that. And OT saying that Ben Herbert made a great impression on the family. I did not hear or see that. Ben Herbert, Michigan's strength and conditioning coach. It wouldn't surprise me if Underwood, this is, he's making a lot of trips to Ann Arbor. He lives right down the road. And we have discussed this, the quarterback recruiting, when Michigan was all in on Dante Moore, and then it didn't happen with Dante Moore. And then it was like, well, Michigan's all in on Jaden Davis. And then Michigan was able to land Jaden Davis. And there were some people saying, well, now it doesn't look like they'll be able to get Underwood, who is in the class of 25, not this upcoming year. For people that don't know, I almost feel like every one of you know everything that's going on in terms of recruiting, but there's always one or two people that don't. Like, what are you talking about? So Underwood is not only a 5-star, he could be the number one player in the 25 class. He is a prospect, not only at the most important position, but right in your own backyard. Michigan would love to be able to get Underwood. And you'd say, well, if the guy wants to play right away and Jaden Davis is there and plays as a freshman, and then Underwood comes in, these guys will be, one will be a sophomore and one would be a freshman. What are you thinking there? Well, you're thinking that when you are a program, like I just mentioned a few minutes ago, like Georgia, like Alabama, a handful of others, not even a handful, a few others, we could name them pretty easy. They do pull 5-stars in consecutive classes, and guys are ready to come in and they believe in themselves and they want to compete. And so this is nothing but good news. There's a lot of people that, dismiss it out of hand. Like, there's no way they'll get Underwood now that they got Davis. I don't know. Why is he coming in so much? Why is he checking everything out? Why is he doing he's just doing his due diligence? Maybe is what you think. I sound like the commissioner last night at a few points up at the podium with a little frog in my throat. But no, I think it's good news with Underwood. Antoine is now weighing in on the football class. We don't need any more offensive linemen unless they project to be super good. I can understand that. But let's agree on something, Antoine. Michigan's got a bunch, but if they are taking them, and I would think that the staff would really think, once you have all of them, I think what we can then assume is that, well, the staff really likes the add-ons that they're getting. If they're overtaking or filling up the position, I don't think overtaking is the recruiting term that I'm looking for. Going, shoot the moon, going for more than that you would expect. That you would assume that they were, in your terminology, super good. Shadyville agreeing with you. He's only looking at high 4-stars and above, and also looking at the roster overall and talking about it being a weakness on the roster is wide receiver. And I have told you that I don't think that that's necessarily the point. I think it's a narrative by Michigan fans. And look, you've got to look for somewhere. You can't just say, boy, the whole thing looks great. And I'm not really saying that either. I'm saying that people are underestimating the current wide receivers. They've got 3 guys that are coming in as true freshmen this year. Sure enough, they don't have a recruit that's sitting out there, but is it a Marion Stewart that's out there from Illinois? There has to be a handful of others, if you're following it, that are really highly rated guys that look like they're interested in coming into Michigan. So I think the wide receiver recruitment is going fine. I think the personnel that's on the team is fine. I think this is a Michigan narrative. Shady, you're not the only one that's in there. And again, you got to look to something, because you couldn't say, boy, Michigan's weak at quarterback right now, because the quarterback room is as strong as it's ever been at Michigan, with a All-American candidate in J.J. McCarthy, a 5-star with Jaden Davis. You got the number 1 player right down the road from Belleville, who in the last 24 hours has been making the rounds in Ann Arbor. Quarterback, great. What are we going to say about offensive line and running back? Great. Tight end, great. So, I mean, you just sit around again. So compared to, I'm trying to come around on the feeling of everybody, and I'm getting it. Compared to everything else, wide receiver could be a weakness. It's kind of like you got like I don't know, whatever your dream car would be. But I got a Porsche 911 convertible, really sweet, sitting out there. And yet all of a sudden I got a couple Benzes and Bentleys pulling up, and people are like, yeah, the Porsche isn't all that hot. Like, hey, wait a second. Mostly it is. I don't know if you are with that one or not, or if I'm reaching, possibly. Like the Lions, we'll get to that coming up. Maybe I'm reaching with my thoughts on the Michigan wide receivers. Shadyville thinks that Bryce Underwood and his dad love Kirk Campbell, the Michigan quarterback coach. Shadyville's talking like, he liked his the strength and conditioning coach made a big impression on the family, according to OT. And now he's indicating that Underwood and his dad love Campbell as well. It doesn't sound like he's guessing. It sounds like he knows. Shadyville, I'm going to say everybody hopes that you are right. AJ actually doesn't want any more offensive linemen. I can understand where you're sitting there. Let's see what Tim is saying. The Big Ten rated the Pac-12 yesterday for 3 officials. Pac-12 now a feeder system to the Big Ten. Not a joke. Well, it won't take long for wherever these officials end up throwing their flags for the fan bases to all say that they hate their team, that these 3 guys are a joke, that, that's what we do as fans. Andres, I was good to see him. Shadyville is all over Underwood talk today, saying he's less likely to commit if there's a top 24 quarterback committed. So he's looked like actually he has seen some quotes from Underwood. There we go. Case in point, Ronnie Bell was the top wide receiver at Michigan, might not even be drafted. Ronnie Bell was not the top wide receiver at Michigan. He was one of the top wide receivers. But you're right. He might not be drafted. Antoine wants positions. He wants some room for some other positions, so we won't be able to get anyone else. All right. Shadyville wants to continue talking either Underwood or receivers. No one is a game changer. I disagree with that. No one that a defense will be worried about playing a single coverage on. I disagree with that. I will introduce as my challenge to you, Shadyville, from the Michigan football team, number 14, Roman Wilson. Defensive coordinators are putting his name on the board. You better think about putting somebody over top, because he'll take the top off of the defense. And you throw the ball short to him. He's got a lot of ability for yards after the catch. He is as fast as anybody in the country, and I think he's one of the most underrated players in the Big Ten, if not the country. So I am disagreeing with both sides of what you have to say when it comes down to Michigan's receivers. And Scott is saying that Kojo, along with Roman and Clemens, are pretty solid. And I'm going to agree with that. I'm going to agree with that, Scott. And I'm going to look at it like the Super Bowl champs, like the two teams that played in the Super Bowl, like Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. Let's start with Jackson because he doesn't really have any receivers, and he just signed his big deal. Mark Andrews is the top receiver in Baltimore, and when you get a guy like Andrews, he gets a receiver. It's not really the depth that you look at from other teams that'll have an X and a Z, and then have the point here is the tight end is one of the main targets for the teams that have a really game-breaking type and one of the best tight ends. And Andrews, that it's like Kansas City, the Super Bowl champs. They've got one of the greatest, if not the greatest, pass-catching tight end of all time in Travis Kelce. They won the Super Bowl last year. Kelce was great in the playoffs. And who was the other team? Oh, I mentioned like Goddard for the Eagles fits in with, and you look, they got A.J. Brown, and they got Devontae Smith. They almost have an embarrassment of riches, and look at what they did in the draft. So maybe Goddard isn't the best example, but Kelce is. And so is Andrews. And that's the role that I think Colston Loveland goes into. And I think you include Loveland if you're going to talk about Michigan's pass catchers. He could lead Michigan in reception. So I would put Loveland in the mix with Kojo, Wilson, and Clemens when you're talking about Michigan's not all that hot when it comes down to receivers. Well, put Loveland in there if you want. But again, it's you got you've got royalty all over there, and so you have to look at something. So I understand that. I do get that part. OT wants more linemen. Andres is appreciating the information coming in about Underwood. OT says he hears Underwood doesn't care and was quoted as saying so. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't see myself, so I don't know where you guys are hearing. And there's other sites. There's people that say things on Twitter. Maybe there's people that yourself. So when you say I hear and this is I don't know. Maybe you're right. I haven't actually seen any quotes myself from Underwood, but I do know that he keeps making trips, over to Ann Arbor. And what I do know about that is that can't hurt. If you're in whatever Harbaugh's saying to him, whatever Campbell's saying to him, whatever Sharon Moore, whatever they're saying to him is, I'm going to think positive with a chance for Michigan to be able to get him. Richard, it's good to see him. He says Michigan looks at some specialists as well, returners and kickers. I will tell you, Richard, I don't know if you know this, or I don't know if you have read it or if you have seen it, but Michigan is in the transfer portal. There is a kicker, and he's a really good kicker, a top kicker, a proven kicker in college football. And Michigan is in on him. It isn't official, I don't know, put him as the leader, one of the leaders, but there's a chance that Michigan could be hitting the transfer portal when it comes to this upcoming season. I don't know if you're talking about recruiting or if you're just talking about what's happening now. Richard taking a shot at Shady, saying that he never saw Barry play. Well, Shady just might be a youngster, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, Barry, it's been a while, since Barry Sanders. When was Barry Sanders done in football? 99? So he played 10 years and he came out in 89, yeah, 99, 2000, Barry Sanders was done. So like you can actually be relatively old. I mean, or whatever you think old is, but I mean, if you're 30 years old, did you watch Barry Sanders play? No. Maybe you could remember, his last year, but if you're 30 and under, you didn't see Barry Sanders. There's nothing wrong with being in your 20s, Shady. It is, there are a few things I've said this week about being older. One of those is that, you do have the advantage of having seen the guys play. And when I see LeBron James and Michael Jordan arguments, or people arguing about, Larry Bird and, acting like, these guys weren't players or anything, like kind of dismissing them. It's like, I know and I did it myself when Jordan and Isaiah and Magic were coming up. My dad would say that Will Chamberlain was the greatest player of all time. And he said, you don't know anything about Will Chamberlain. And, they would tell me about Will Chamberlain. And I'd say, but there was nobody that could, it was like Will Chamberlain was playing with a bunch of guys that were like 5'10". And he said, that wasn't the case. Will Chamberlain could play in any era, but, so now that's happening a little bit. And that does happen in all sports. Let's go to Andres, who says, he's with Shady. None of the Michigan wide receivers scare defenses, but if one develops into a real one-on-one winner, they will be a serious problem because teams will commit to Michigan's run game. Well, how about I meet you halfway there? I agree with your assessment about if they have a real one-on-one winner, there'll be a serious problem. So there you go. Antoine says you can't criticize the wide receiver position, Shady. According to Dennis, we are all good. You can criticize anything, Antoine. I just might not agree with you. You might not agree with me. I might not agree with you. And then we'll just talk it over. And, like I do offer to any of you, you certainly have the platform over here where we can discuss it. You can also say, I want to call in on the show. And I will make that happen. You can send me an email and give me your phone number, and we'll get you on the show, and we can discuss it for, a period of time. You can also, if you don't want your phone number being out there from me, I can understand something like that. I don't necessarily, want to post my own phone number up here, but there's also a way to do it through Twitter Spaces, where you just have to go through Twitter and then hit a button. And so that all can happen. Well, I'm here for good discussion, Antoine. That's what I'm all about. And, I don't think everything I say is, everybody takes it to the bank. I'm just giving you my opinion and with my experience and my background. And I think you guys have a point. I think that what does happen, though, is that fans start connecting. And I just explained what I think about the Michigan offense. Everything's great. So you have to look at one position. And if you are going to look at one position, it would be the wide receivers. But then it kind of picks up steam with people that are like, oh, Michigan. And, that's what fans do. They take the narratives and, if you have 100 Michigan fans seeing it, there probably is a point to that. But, I'm here not always to just go with what everybody else has to say. I'm here to give my own opinion on it, and we're not always going to agree. Tim is talking about Michigan taking 25 this year, room for one more offensive lineman and probably 2 receivers. Yeah. Well, the numbers, we'll see, how those ended up shaking out with the transfer portal, guys moving in and moving out. Yeah, I think they can get to 25. Shady likes Clemens. He just doesn't have the experience. Well, there you go. Maybe he'll come out and he could be one. I made the mistake of saying Roman Wilson needs to lift weight so he can remain healthy through the season, but I was disagreed with there. No, I don't think so. I think Roman Wilson, I think these guys all have their training. I think they all lift weights around the calendar. I think during the season, they all are have some whatever their training is. It includes weightlifting. If I recall the conversation, you were talking about maybe he needed to bulk up or needed to get stronger legs or something like that. And I didn't agree with that. I mean, Roman Wilson looks like he's well put together, and when you're talking about a wide receiver and game breaking ability, I mean, the guy runs. What did Turner run, Antoine? He ran a 4.26 at the combine. You remember Harbaugh saying in one of those podcasts that he had that, yeah, Turner was running and Wilson was right with him. Right with him, like these guys have the same kind of speed. Roman Wilson's a sub 4.3 wide receiver. You know how many guys that were picked last night in the first round were sub 4.3 guys? I don't know. Maybe the guy that the Lions got. They're maybe Zay Flowers. Any of those other guys? Sub 4.3 guys? That's what OT's talking about. Oh. Antoine hopes that Michigan can get a new wide receivers coach and expand the route tree. Tim wants more crossing routes. Antoine wants more slants. And there we are. Shadyville wants to know what Barry Sanders has to do with anything. He's been watching football for over 30 years. I don't know where that came from. I thought maybe that was a connection that you had with somebody else. Michigan Wolverine says, stop pronouncing the R before the D. Vidra? Is that how to pronounce it? I apologize if I've mispronounced Jake Guarnera's city in Florida. I definitely try to get the pronunciations correct, but as I'm looking at it, and you spell it out that way, it does seem that I am mistaken. So thanks, Michigan Wolverine. I can tell you this for sure, that I have done podcasts and sometimes when I get done and I go back and I'm like, wow, why did I say that? Why did I say this? And sometimes it happens throughout the day. I'm looking for always the correct information. So if I say something wrong, if I pronounce something wrong, you definitely, it's not so much calling me out, but I'm in the pursuit of the correct information. I'm with you on that. So thank you. Thank you very much. I know earlier this week that I was talking about one of the Smith brothers, Jared Smith, who it's either Gerard or Jared. I guess I need to figure out which one of those it is. And I identified a Connecticut and I called it the Granite State. And then I said, is Connecticut? I went back and then I checked it. And no, New Hampshire is actually the Granite State. So I missed that one. So I apologize when it comes down to it. Oh, there it is. Venice is saying that you don't need a number one wide receiver to win the championship. I get it. We want one, but it's not number one on the list. 99 problems, but wide receiver ain't one. Scott with a little Jay-Z going at it here. I think that we have gone through what we're looking at here. Roman Wilson is a skin and bones. Okay. Dave, we're 25-3 with 2 Big Ten championships and 2 playoff appearances. What are you guys talking about changing up to the pass? Don't listen, Coach Harbaugh. Keep doing you. Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. Yeah. Well, the one thing about it, my pronunciation being a funky mix, being a broadcaster, that is there's nothing that you could say that would be more hurtful. Well, I guess there is a lot of things you could say that would be more hurtful, but it's a hurtful thing. I want to get the correct pronunciations out there, so I apologize if I don't get those correct. Let's get back to it. Let's go to last night and the draft in the first round. I think we'll all agree on this and everything that happens here. Mazi Smith ends up going in the first round to the Cowboys. So congratulations to Mazi. Exactly what the Cowboys were in need of. Of course, they, would like to get a tight end as well. I thought it was curious on two fronts. One, if you were watching the draft on ESPN, that Louis Riddick, he was questioning Mazi's effort, and they just looked at his sack production from the defensive tackle position. It wasn't great. He did have a lot of pressures, but I think this was a narrative that some of these analysts, and maybe they have a point. I did not hear in Mazi Smith's career anybody say, hey, he really needs to crank up his motor, or he needs to fight more with his hands, or he needs to make sure he's being consistent with his effort. I never heard any of that. That doesn't mean I could have just been missing it, but I never heard any of that. And then last night, Louis Riddick for about 2 minutes was going on about Mazi's effort. And I'm thinking, wow. And then he said, like, hey, if he was able to do this, he would have been drafted a lot, sooner in a draft. And I'm thinking, wow, a run stuffing defensive tackle. If he had more effort than Mazi, he would have been picked, so what are we talking about, in the teens, anywhere before 26, because he was a first round pick. That was a little bit of a surprise to me. And then I was reading the Athletic, who was giving out grades in the draft and everything today. And then their guy said that there were questions about consistent effort from Mazi and his inability to finish at the quarterback, but those will be addressed. The second part here, I think, is, and, Louis Riddick, these guys might have just watched the tape and come up with that themselves. And if you do see Mazi, I was watching a little tape today where he was chasing down and getting a hurry of the quarterback, but was not actually able to get the hands and tear the quarterback and put him on the ground for a quarterback sack. And there were a number of situations like that. So finishing it off and getting that actual quarterback sack, I don't know if this is a narrative, kind of like Michigan wide receivers are less than, that the fan base has picked up on. I wonder if this is something that even some of the national guys miss the boat on when it comes down to Mazi. It doesn't mean, and again, these guys might be right. I might have just missed this. I didn't notice it myself, but I think it just may be one of those things that you say that if you're a lineman and you're getting to the quarterback and you're hurrying him and you're moving him out of the pocket and you're not tearing him down to the ground and getting the quarterback sack, that it goes to like, well, you need to have better effort and being able to finish it off. And so I don't know. Here's two different sources talking consistent effort. And if you heard Riddick last night, there was no doubt. I didn't put his quotes up here and what he was saying, but there was no doubt that he was questioning the what you want to call it, consistent effort from Mazi. But there it is. It's always good to get different opinions and to see what people are saying there. So, but congratulations to Mazi for being able to get in and get it done. You want to get it in and get it done. I want Antoine on the Maize and Blue review. He'll know about the recruits. He'll know about what's going on with basketball and football. And then as we discuss here at the 1 o'clock hour, you can do it all day, all night over on the Den. So join the Maize and Blue review today by going to michigan.rivals.com. It was fun last night in the chat during the NFL draft. We were going from pretty much the first pick all the way to 32 and weighing in on our thoughts on the draft. And a lot of that had to do with the Lions. Speaking of the Lions, we'll get to them coming up momentarily, but here's some news from the basketball team. And I'm going to go ahead and say it's breaking news. Jaelin Llewellyn has been granted his medical red shirt. He will return to Michigan. So this is good news for the Maize and Blue, an experienced guard, hopefully able to come back at 100% or close to it when he got hurt over in England when he tore up his knee, being able to come back and your 1-2 punch at point guard, Doug McDaniel and Jaelin Llewellyn. However, you get Caleb Love into the mix. Those would be the three primary guards that you're talking about. You want to start putting the newcomer Namari Burnett in there. Okay, that'll all shake out. But Michigan, this puts them up to 11 scholarships. And so they still have 2 out there. And we'll see who the 2, it feels like the 2 guys that they need to bring in and transfer portal that they still need help. This isn't a finished product. It feels like these last 2 are pretty important on what they'll be able to do when it comes down with the transfer portal and the remaining scholarships that they have. Always good to see Gary. Let's see. I'm going to hit the feedback here. We're still talking Michigan wideouts and it's all good. I don't mind, again, criticism that's coming through. It's all good. I can handle it. I'm never going to say I've got broad shoulders, but look, I mean, this is what it's about. Being able to take criticism and trying to get it done. Gary saying the Cowboys are getting a great player. I agree. I think they are getting a great player. OT says the national media dudes never know what they're talking about. Yeah, I don't agree with that. I'm not here to defend the national media or anyone else, but I would think that, it's one of these things that when you're in the media, and I'll just say right here what I'm doing, it's kind of like being in the media. You are a target. So I know that there would be people that would, in most part here, people are all pretty nice and everything else. But when you put yourself out here, people are going to take shots at you. They're going to take shots at your appearance. They're going to take shots at what you say. They're going to take shots at how you say it. And, sometimes they're not doing it in a very constructive way. And, the national media will say about somebody like you, OT, and your criticism, you might have a point. I don't know what specifically you're talking about. Oh, maybe you're talking about with Mazi Smith. But, these guys would say, fans are wild. They'll just say anything. And, the thing about the guy, I didn't know the guy that was grading and said that about Mazi Smith from the Athletic. But I do know who Louis Riddick is. And Louis Riddick is not up there saying things and kind of just pulling things out of his ass. He knows the game. He's that close to being a general manager in the NFL. Wouldn't surprise anybody if he gets one of those jobs in the next couple of years. He's been up for a couple already. And, he's not he's not looking to, just say wild things like a Stephen A. Smith to kind of just, stoke the fire. It's not one of the opinionated show like Smith is on that, you got to just throw a bunch of stuff in there. He's critiquing the guys. You're not always going to like it. So, this, when you say national dudes never know, I mean, really? They never know? Like, that's it's a little weird. No, it's not a little weird. It's just one of those things that happen. That's what fans say. I mean, so there's a lot of local people that don't know what they're talking about. And there might be a lot of Michigan people. Like, I haven't seen one, and I don't read every or listen to every person that covers Michigan. But I didn't see anyone, say anything about the effort situation there. In fact, when it comes down to Mazi and what he was able to do last year and the snaps that he played, it looks like he got himself into really good condition and in the way that he was able to be out there and the production that he provided. Now, I didn't see that, and I didn't hear any of that. That doesn't mean that those guys are wrong. It doesn't necessarily mean that everybody over here has just got their maize and blue glasses on either. But, I like I said, I'll explain it to you again this way. These guys that might not necessarily have watched any Michigan games last year, they'll look at the highlights and they'll see the pressures. They'll see a small sack number from Mazi Smith, and then they see him pouring in on the quarterback a lot of times and just missing the QB. And then they're going to watch the technique. And if they don't see the punt and a couple reps, who knows about which, Mazi, if we pulled 100 reps out, and I don't know anybody from 0 to 100 reps that has maybe, there's all the consistent effort that you want and every single rep. Maybe there's going to be a couple reps where you can say, I can see what they're looking at. So I thought it was interesting that it was more than one person that talked about that. And I hadn't heard anything about that as well. Cowboys reaching for a Michigan player. Yeah, well, they play two different positions. You're talking about Taco, and now you're talking about Mazi. There is, it's great that you come from Michigan. That Mazi went in the first round or Taco went in the first round have nothing, to do with anything. Now, you could say that a defensive tackle that is more of a known as a run stuffer, which Mazi is, for positional value, you wouldn't want to take him in the first round. The Lions took two players that, if you follow people that that look at the NFL and the metrics and they don't like, it would be like taking if the Lions took a Jake Moody. He's a great football player, but do you think Jake Moody should go in the second round? And it's a little bit extreme, but that's what the Lions did with their positional value. They took two really good football players, but two football players that likely would have been picked further back than they were in the first round. So they reached. And I don't know, Taco, for whatever it was, Taco was an edge player. Those guys get taken in the first round. Taco was a pretty productive player. It doesn't always work out. You don't know about their love of the game or injuries that hampered them or whatever it was with Taco. Name the teams that Michigan didn't run on. That's what they do. They run the football. Then the playbook opens. Yeah, maybe the Bulldogs from 2 years ago that are all now playing for the Eagles. They drafted the front line and a couple of the linebackers in there. All right, let's turn our attention to some draft stuff. I don't know how much you guys are into what the Lions did, but I'm going to give you some opinions on what happened here. Lions move back from 6 where they were sitting, and then they take a running back from Alabama, Jahmyr Gibbs. And then the pick at 18, that's their own pick. The 6th pick was from the Rams, and then they moved back, and then they got the third pick in the second round for moving back. The Lions take Jack Campbell, a linebacker from Iowa. Now, this is my gut feel on what the Lions did. I think they wanted Devin Witherspoon at 6, and the Seahawks put the card in one before them. And then I think a little bit of, I don't know if it was panic. That's a little bit of the appearance. I think then the Lions, who obviously were interested in a running back, I think that they had their eyes on Bijan Robinson. Obviously, they like Gibbs too. And they're like, let's move back to 12. And then Robinson went to the Falcons. And then the Lions, who could have, they may have liked Forbes and Gonzalez. They could have moved back to 18, and there would have been a very good chance that Gibbs would have been there. But I think they gambled, and they thought, one of the two corners of Forbes and Gonzalez would be there. And this is the game that you play, because there's a lot of people saying the Patriots loved Gibbs. The Patriots, who also have a log jam at running back, maybe they did, but I would have put my money, and so this is my thoughts on Gibbs being there at 12. I would have also put my money on Campbell not being selected in the first round. That's what I think. The Lions are very aggressive, liking the players that they did, but it appeared to me that they panicked, and that right when they were sitting where they had their guy, a team picked him right before that. And I think they wanted the corner, and I think here they wanted two corners, and in both spots they ended up, coming up with their second, and maybe in this case their third choice. Now, there have been many cases. Just think about coaching hires where You have your idea like, hey, this is our first choice, doesn't happen, here's our second choice, and you end up getting your third choice, and it ends up working out. But it wasn't your top choice. And this is just my opinion here. I look at the Lions, and they spent the $6 million to bring in David Montgomery from the Bears, and they have DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift is an excellent back. Now the Lions, they don't like how he runs and likes to kick it outside or whatever else. They don't like him. It's obvious that this staff doesn't like him, and that is going to be something there. But to take a position which was a strength, I mean, the Lions running back going into this time yesterday, the Lions running back room was a strength. Now they use a number 12 pick, which is goes against the grain on what you do in modern day football, and they take a running back at 12 with already a strong room. Now they're going to bounce Swift and they're going to put Gibbs in there, and it's like, hey, he's an excellent player, but so was Swift, and it just doesn't make me feel really good about what they did there. And then they came up with a double first round reach. If you're just asking me what I thought of the draft, I thought that the Lions had a double first round reach. I think that they didn't have good value with their selections. I think they made a bad use of their draft capital. I think they boxed themselves in when it came to their selections. Gibbs needs to be Marshall Faulk, or the Lions are going to have egg on their face there. Campbell needs to be Chris Spielman, and these guys need to hit the ground running and doing it. When you take and do something way out of left field and totally against their grain, if this was 1999, I think people would be sitting around saying, oh, what great selections. It's 2023. Taking running backs and taking middle linebackers in the first round, there's a reason that teams don't do it. Short shelf life, positional value. It's you put running back and you put linebackers back there with punters and kickers. And so they're totally out of the box here. Now, if you've listened to me, I like GMs and head coaches that zig while everybody else is zagging. I like it when it works. But when it doesn't, you look really stupid. And when you do it and you're doing the zag, people are going to point out like, this is really unconventional. This is really against the grain. This is what the Lions did. Now look, Jim Harbaugh 2 years ago, this is what he decided to do. They were going to double down on running the football. They were, while other teams are thinking about speed and space and let's get the football down the field, let's throw it every down. Harbaugh's like, no, let's go back to the 70s and let's run the football. And it worked for him. Harbaugh zagged, and it came out magically. Harbaugh was painted into a corner a little bit. It was like the end for him. Even the closest Michigan or the most dyed-in-the-wool Michigan fans were thinking, hey, maybe it's just time we need to move on. But Harbaugh doubled down. So maybe this will be, Holmes's great day. We'll look back and say, the guy, because up to this point, he's done a pretty good job. I mean, he can't help that his wide receiver, the injured wide receiver that he picked last year, that they got nothing from last year, went out and was gambling and got himself suspended for damn near half the year. He can't help that. But he's had a pretty good run up to this point. But it's got to continue. Like, they've got to go out. They're now the favorites in the NFC North. People, you expect the Detroit Lions, as weird as it sounds, because it's been 30 years, 25 years, 30 years since they've won the NFC North. And now, you're expecting them to do it, and then they come up with what they did last night. Now, I get uber Lion fans. Lion fans they don't even know how to act. And I include myself in that because we haven't seen it. We haven't seen it for 30 years. This is a franchise that has been one of the worst in all of sports for 50 years in my lifetime. So you always have to weigh that in that doesn't have very much to do with Holmes. It does, because he needs to understand. Somebody was telling me last night, like, well, shouldn't you give Brad Holmes the benefit of the doubt? Well, yeah, he's gonna get the benefit of the doubt. I hope that what he has done works. I have also seen 50 years of general managers and coaches for the Lions with their fan base who are just in love with whatever they do, and that's what fans do. Oh, Holmes, he's playing chess, and everybody else is playing checkers. And then you look, oh man, this guy's got a great RAS score. Man, Holmes really knows what he's doing. Let's ride. They're smarter than all the media and everybody else. That's fine. But you also have to look at it and say, hey, did you like what they did or didn't? And I didn't like what they did. I thought they kicked it. I thought that they had a bad night. Now, that's just my opinion and how I saw it. We'll find out how they end up doing there. If I had to give them a grade last night, I'll give them a D. Not a very good job for your Detroit Lions. Let's see if anybody is with me, or you were sitting back saying, pretty good night for the Lions. Let's see. Now Shadyville is now we found a common ground. Yeah, I agree with you. I don't know. I think Gibbs, he was pegged to be a pick in the 20s, and so the Lions taking him at 12. That qualifies, to me as a reach. So 5'8" speed burners, scat backs, the way the NFL is going, they throw the ball to him a lot. He better be Alvin Kamara. He needs to be, Marshall Faulk. There's the idea about pouring draft capital into the running back position to begin with. And the thing to me is, like, they've already got good backs. Like, if this was the Philadelphia Eagles and you're just polishing things off, or the Kansas City Chiefs, and you're just saying, hey, look, most of this is just luxury. We have built this. The Lions aren't there yet. And so to go to a position that's already been a strength, where they've got a lot of other weaknesses, and saying, it's a strength, but it's not necessarily exactly where we want it. So we're going to take DeAndre Swift, who is a good back. We're going to jettison him, and we're going to put somebody else in there because we like him, or the other guy wasn't our guy. I don't have a good feel about it, because it was a strong position already, because Swift is a good player, and because positional value says don't take a running back in the first round unless he's a generational talent. So that's what the Lions did. They took a big swing at a player, and they gambled. Maybe it ends up happening. AM's going back to Michigan on the vertical passing game. Yeah, I've been down this road. I'll say it again. AM, maybe you missed it. Michigan's vertical passing game wasn't existent through the first 11 games of the season. They tried to take shots. They didn't get on the same page. I think about late in the season, Andrell Anthony had one right down at the goal line. A bomb to him. Couldn't catch it. Went right through his hands. It ended up being one of those things where I think it was in JJ's head a little bit, and I think it was in the wide receiver's head, and it certainly was in the fan base's head. Michigan can't, they had a hole in their game. They couldn't throw the ball deep and connect. And then what happened? The Ohio State game. They broke the seal. They did it against Purdue. They did it against TCU. I think that the vertical passing game is going to be available from week one. And certainly in the Big Ten season, I think it's going to be an added dimension that Michigan's going to have. So I think when you say you would prefer that they expand in the vertical passing game, I would say that they now have that as something that they could do. And I'll put, it's not much. I was going to say, I'll put all my money on it. I don't have much money. I'll put whatever I have on Michigan taking deep shots and including a downfield passing game from week one. But it's not going to really matter against East Carolina, UNLV, and BG, but against Rutgers, at Nebraska, at Minnesota. That is going to be available. And it's going to be part of the game plan. Michigan taking deep shots. And you know what? When other teams have to overpopulate the line of scrimmage and they have to move people into the box because Blake Corum and the one-armed bandit are gashing them in the run game, JJ coming up with a little play action and hitting the fastest guy in the country down the middle of the field, who's going to have a one-on-one look with not a safety over the top, or maybe it'll be Clemens over there, maybe it'll be Kojo. People are like, hey, that run game can really help the vertical passing game. I think it's all married up now. I think it's good. Going back to that Michigan passing game. Shadyville, Bijan Robinson, who was looked at as a generational running back, would have been good at 12. You know, they probably should have taken him at 6 if they were so dead set on taking a running back. And that's what it does when you do the, it's crazy. It's not crazy. It's just unconventional with modern thinking in football and positional value. But Bijan Robinson better not be like the greatest thing ever and Gibbs just being okay, because the Lions will have kicked it in that spot. They were dead set on taking a running back, and they moved back, and they could have had Robinson, and they didn't do it. And then they reached on a linebacker. And, you know, the corners that they could have had at 12 as well instead of a running back. This is a fair point. Swift can't stay healthy. I don't know how you look at that when you're an NFL team. You do get that label. You do need to be out on the field, but do you look at your guy? I mean, it's a brutal game with guys getting hit. And if you're missing time, do you say, well, this guy's injury prone, let's bounce him? I think that's a good point. Gary coming back and adding as well. You know, that Swift is hurt. So that's what they're looking at. LA took Stafford for one great season. Would we take Stafford for one great season? Look, it worked. LA won the Super Bowl. Would I take and give the picks if I thought that it was the final piece to get the Lions to the Super Bowl? Yes. And so if you think, and I don't know, like this is why sometimes when I don't have the chance to talk right back and see where you're coming from, if you're feeling like Swift is going to be the piece that puts the Lions over the top, that, you know, gets them to be a Super Bowl team, you know, we may look back. I might be sitting here in a couple months saying, during the NFL season, saying, wow, but you know, Brad Holmes, this guy knew what he was doing all along. Look at him. Look at the Lions. They're not only going to win the North, maybe they'll get a bye. And look, the NFC overall, all the strength over in the AFC, whatever you think of San Francisco, their window might be closing. And the Eagles, they're a juggernaut. But I mean, look, it's a long ways away. Maybe the Lions could be the second best team in the NFC. There's some of the breaks he's talking about. Maybe they'll be the best team. That sounds crazy. I'm not ready to say that the Lions are shooting for the number 1 seed. I am ready to say that they're the favorite in the NFC North. And if you have a home playoff game and you are the Detroit Lions, they should win that home playoff game. So the Lions winning a playoff game, is they've done that one time in 70 years. The Lions winning the NFC North, there are only 4 teams. And it's been over 25 years since they've done that. And there's only 4 teams. You'd think you would fall into an NFC North crown one time. No. But they should do both of those things. Win the North and win a playoff game. First round pick should be instant impact players. Sometimes I understand what you're saying there. I think a lot of times teams are looking, they're looking at their cap situation, but they're also looking to the next year. I think there's a lot of parts in there, but this is one part of it. And I think both of these guys are going to be starters for them that they have. So I understand what you're talking about. Richard's been waiting over 60 years. TKL talking about Gibbs being a gamble. Got drafted to catch balls out of the backfield. He's no Alvin Kamara, but he has experience running inside while at Georgia Tech. The thing with Alvin Kamara, he was picked in the 3rd round. That's the thing. He needs to be Alvin Kamara. What's this about Campbell? They mentioned the Lions like Campbell. Maybe they'll move down to take him. Gibbs at 18. They mentioned the Lions like Campbell. Maybe they'll move down to take him. Yeah, they took Gibbs at 12, and then they took Campbell at 18. Yeah, I don't know about moving down, but if they were available to do that, they could have. I'll put everything that I have on, and so whatever it's worth, you could say, I don't think so. And so that's what it's all about. I think Gibbs would have been there at 18, and I think Campbell would have been there at 34. And so now you got to pick at 12. If they would have picked Christian Gonzalez, and hell, if they liked Emmanuel Forbes, the 2 corners that went 16 and 17, they'd have taken those guys at 12. They'd have taken Gibbs at 18, and now tonight they'd have taken Campbell, who they got for moving back, at 34, I think the pick is. I guess I have it in front of me here, so let's get it out there. 34. That would have been a little bit better, but they didn't. I don't think they maneuvered well. I think they got caught with their pants down a little bit. They got caught, with teams getting their players right before them, and then I think they reached. Weestro. It's possible in my mind, though, that the team got forced that way after Blake got hurt. You might be right. Well, you're talking about the downfield passing game. They were trying to get the downfield passing game going throughout the year. You remember they missed Roman Wilson a few times. I can remember McCarthy being asked about it, and he said, look, I didn't have the spring, and he said he's got to put the ball on the receivers. They were missing it. It just wasn't there. He wasn't putting the ball on the receiver. Sometimes the receivers could have bailed him out, and then it became, I think, a mental thing. But then when you play a team like Ohio State, Michigan wasn't running the ball effectively in the first half. And they needed to, you had to have they weren't just going to be able to smash their way to victory against Ohio State. Although it loosened them up, it was the passing game. And, Michigan wants to do that. They want to be able to do everything. They want to win it all. And so, having that ability to be able to get the ball down the field is something that I think that they'll be at. There's people talking about the SEC. Who thinks with the money that will be going to the Big Ten who thinks with the money that will be going to the Big Ten is scaring SEC? I don't know. The Big Ten is, when it comes to money, the SEC, when it comes to championships over the last 20 years, they've got them almost all of them. So they win. But when it comes to the money championship and who's getting the most money, it's the Big Ten. And that's continued with their contract. The SEC's doing just fine with themselves. I mean, you got 2 major players there. So, the Big Ten's doing great. The SEC's doing great. All of the other 3 Power Fives, not so hot. You see the ACC's contract, they're locked in, and it's going to kill them. The Pac-12, because where they're at, they're getting killed when it comes to a TV contract. Big 12, not so hot when you compare it to the SEC. Otis says, I can tell you many of their podcast people are starting to talk about it, especially with ESPN having financial issues. You mean Disney and ESPN, which is all that same one? Yeah, I'm not that worried about the SEC and money when it comes down to that. And if that's what their podcast people are talking about, that they're just adding in Texas and Oklahoma. The SEC is not going anywhere. I'm no honk for the SEC, but the Big Ten, taking over the SEC because of money or financial issues with the ESPN, I would put that in the same category as I'd put that as a reach by any of their podcast guys and what you're talking about. Revenue sharing could be a game changer. Revenue sharing in what way? They already do revenue share. The money is their TV money is already shared. So I'm not really sure what you're talking about. This is a game changer. If you're talking about giving it to the players and some kind of revenue sharing, maybe. Now, here's the thing. The Big Ten doesn't necessarily want to be giving their players, money there. And when it comes down to that, I don't, you got Title IX that's involved in there. It's going to be a game changer for college sports if you're sharing any revenue that way. I would think I don't think that you can just get that money out of there. Can you give TV money and just divvy it up and give it to the players without getting involved with Title IX? Maybe you can do that. So, maybe there is something to be done there that you're talking about. Shadyville with players. Yeah, maybe. I don't see the Big Ten just wanting to cough up a large amount of revenue that they already have to give to players when they're already in a pretty good spot. You know what I mean? So that's how I see it. All right. So 5 o'clock, let's give you a quick update. 5 o'clock, we're waiting to see if Michigan gets another offensive lineman. It's there. The possibility of it happening, it looks like it's going to happen in Jake Guarnera from Ponte Vedra. Vedra? I think Ponte Vedra. Ponte Vedra. That's it. We'll see what happens there. I'm going to be watching the draft all weekend and the NHL and NBA playoffs. And then we'll be back on Monday at 1 o'clock to talk about the latest in Michigan sports. Thanks so much for everybody for joining us. Hopefully I'll be 100% with my tongue, which I bit a few days ago, and it's still affecting me just a little bit. Maybe I won't talk until Monday. Fat chance at that. Have a great weekend, and thanks for watching and listening.